sick and tired of the high costs and inefficiency plaguing our U.S. healthcare system? Do you feel like you're navigating a maze when dealing with insurance companies, only to end up paying a fortune for basic medical services? Then this Broken Healthcare podcast is for you. So get ready to take control of your healthcare. Here's your host, Ray Kober.
And we're live. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the big show. Welcome to Broken Healthcare. I am delighted to have our next guest with us, Bart Camerata, who is the executive producer of It's Not Personal, It's Just Healthcare. Welcome to the big show, Bart. Bart Camerata, welcome to the big show. Thrilled that you're here. This documentary is fascinating. I was drawn to it because I'm passionate about what I do in healthcare. Obviously, I have a podcast. I produced this documentary, one of the producers. And what drew me to it was, I believe it's a story that needs to be told. And even though in our circles, we are kind of the insiders who know the ins and outs of what's broken in healthcare, and we talk about it every day, and we seem to kind of get, at least speaking for myself, I tend to forget that people don't know what I know. And having a documentary produced, such as the one that you just made, really shines a light on what is corrupt, what is broken, what is toxic in healthcare. And so where did this come from? You know, did you intend to, has this been a project that's been a long time in the making? When you grew up, did you want to be Steven Spielberg? Talk to me, baby.
Yeah, so honestly, creating a documentary wasn't on my radar for the longest time. I've actually, much like yourself, I've been in the benefits industry from the marketing and video side for years. So I've worked with benefit advisors for, the last 10 or 12 years, creating marketing materials, educational materials, you name it, from everything from benefit advisors to third-party point solutions, you name it. And I've been intimately involved in sort of the behind the scenes of the healthcare system. So in my years of experience, I heard story after story, right? And I really got sort of a behind the scenes view of what was going on as far as the business of healthcare. And through working with my clients, benefit advisors and the like, I noticed that they kept running into a lot of the same problems, which of course comes down to education. C-suite executives, HR professionals, and the like of a lot of these large companies simply didn't understand the business of healthcare and how it impacted the company budget and bottom line. Moreover, they didn't understand that there was something they could do about it, right? So one of the things we talk about in the documentary, of course, is healthcare's big lie. And the big lie is very simple. You can't control the cost of healthcare. And you and I know that that's not true, but most of America doesn't know that that's not true, right?
Well, it seems fantastical when you propose that you can control the cost of healthcare, right? I talk to CFOs and CEOs every day and HR executives, and they're like, you can't do that, right?
Well, and not only that, but when my clients and other benefit advisors were having these high-level conversations with company leaders, they immediately ran into skepticism because if this was true, I would have heard about it. Right? If what you're telling me is true, my broker would have told me, the insurance company would have told me, and I would know about this. So really, the sort of genesis behind this documentary was to answer that question, was to solve that problem. Right. So now with this documentary, they will hear about it. Right.
Yeah.
And so it won't be so fantastical and so hard to believe when our producers and other benefit advisors come calling to talk about controlling the cost of healthcare. It won't be such a difficult pill to swallow, if you allow the pun, for these C-suite executives.
Yeah, well, it just seems logical, right? Even though it's fantastical and unbelievable because we've been conditioned by this $5 trillion machine that is healthcare, that to believe the big lie that you can't control it. We don't do this in any other aspect of our lives, right? If you need a barbecue grill, you go out to Amazon and you do a Google search and you scour the internet for the best price on that Weber grill that you want. If you're shopping for, well, once upon a time a hair dryer, Bart, I don't need one anymore, but if I needed a blow dryer, like, hey, I'd be all over the internet for that. You name it, we're out there shopping for it. But when it comes to healthcare, we don't know the cost of anything. And so I think the documentary does do an excellent job of shining a light on it. You have such a great cast of characters. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about who is in the feature and how you found them, and what kind of led you to say, these are the folks that I'm going to tap into to tell this story.
Yeah. So how the documentary came together is kind of interesting. So originally, the idea behind the documentary and what makes it different is the fact that it's crafted to speak specifically to business leaders, HR executives, C-suite folks, and really focus on the business of healthcare. Because one of the weaknesses that I noticed in my research with a lot of other healthcare documentaries is they really focus on the patient side of things. And really, when it comes to healthcare, health insurance, and things like that, the patients really don't have much of a say in how they approach the healthcare system. It really comes down to, they get to check one of 3 boxes come open enrollment, but the health plan design and how everything gets paid for and purchased is really decided by the employer in most cases. The vast majority of Americans get their health insurance through their employer. So it was important for me in this documentary to collect and assemble experts from around the country that could speak to the different areas of the business side of healthcare. Because, company leaders make decisions based on math, numbers, right? Cost, EBITDA, right? These are all terms that that guide the decision of a company to a very large degree. So I wanted to limit the amount of emotional appeal in the documentary and really talk about business. So the first expert who actually had me in mind really was Deb Alt from AIM.
Nurse Deb.
Nurse Deb, I floated this idea of doing a documentary with Nurse Deb. Nurse Deb loved the idea, and she stayed on me until it came to be, right? And so
you're saying that Deb is tenacious?
Oh, yeah. If you know Nurse Deb, she is not a woman. She is a force of nature, right? She is, and a very dear friend. I've known her for years, worked with her for years. And so really she stayed on me to create this documentary. And so she was the first expert and really sort of the genesis of the documentary, because a lot of the stories and that we heard that inspired the documentary came from working with her team of nurses, hearing their stories and the stories of their patients, right? Because of where AIM sits in the healthcare industry, right? There's kind of the central nervous system of the health plan. So everything flows through AIM in a lot of ways because of where AIM sits and the nurses and the guidance that they provide.
Yeah, and so for our audience, if you're not familiar, so AIM is an acronym for Alt International Medical Management. And Deb, that Bart is referring to, I also consider a friend. She is a force of nature. I think that's very apt. And we say that with peace and love, Nurse Deb, because we don't want to get on her bad side. But when it comes to her clients, she is a pit bull, and that's who you want in your corner when the chips are down and you've just been dealt a diagnosis and you're in uncharted territory, you want a professional who's an expert in the field on your side, looking at the data, not simply picking from, any doctor or physician or surgeon that happens to be in network. There's actual math and science behind procuring the best providers. And we know that, and really, I think the first time that I learned this lesson was from Deb, that the highest quality providers are almost always the least costly providers. And so I think she's an excellent kind of first pick, if you will, or someone to I think you're right. This is someone who really sits in the center of your health plan and, for lack of a better term, is really triaging care, right? So you're right, 100%. She's
Totally
basically, her team is sitting at the center of everything saying, all right, incoming, we have, someone that needs a knee replacement. Do they really need a knee replacement? Let's start there, right? And that's a good place to start, where in a traditional plan, you don't really have any such mechanism.
Well, and 2 points I'll add to that is, one, you'll never find a greater champion for the change of American healthcare than Nurse Deb Alt.
Yeah.
And then 2, when you get to know the AIM team of nurses, right, the people that are interacting with patients are actual nurses. And, nurses are basically the equivalent of angels on earth, these people that care and just, sacrifice so much to protect their patients.
God bless them.
Right. To just
could not agree more. Yeah. These
right.
are God's
They're just
people.
Special people. Angels are just special. The nurses are just these special people. And so it is certainly rings true when you visit the AIM offices and you get to know her team. It's just unbelievable. So she was the first expert, and then she introduced me to Renzo Luzzati, our PBM expert, who Renzo, just blew us away.
Yeah.
USRX Care, like that guy is just a total, just numbers and, just a total healthcare nerd, if you will.
Yeah, he's
right?
a geek,
Just
but he
knowledge he has.
Yeah.
And he was very, and I'll say this, so during the interview process, he was very sort of self-conscious. He's not one to sort of get in front of the camera that much, right?
Yep.
And so he was concerned that he wasn't doing a great job. Meanwhile, David, my director of photography, and myself are losing our minds because he was just blowing away.
Yeah.
Right. So Renzo was a great find. I got one of our producers. Oh, Dr. Keith Smith. I had heard about Surgery Centers of Oklahoma for years.
Pioneer in that field. Yeah.
Totally. And I wanted a doctor in this documentary. So I got introduced to him through one of our producers. He was an amazing interview and so giving, so well. I mean, he let David and I put on scrubs and walk into the surgery arena, the surgery room while surgery was going on. Right.
Wow.
So I mean, we got the full treatment.
You had to be sterile, right? You had to be sterile.
Oh yeah, we had to wash up and like he had
down.
Scrubs, everything. You're right. So
you see, you learned something new from joining our podcast, folks. I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Yeah. That's cool though, because you're on the front line. You're actually seeing what these people do day to day. And, physicians and surgeons are right up there with nurses. I'm going to give the edge to nurses in terms of, if we're scoring this, it's always the nurse that's just the most compassionate, the one that's going to hold your hand, the one that's going to calm you down. Maybe the surgeon that technically, has got more schooling and training and know it all, blah, 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 blah. But nurses and physicians, surgeons, they really work hand in hand. And the reality is, broken healthcare is not an indictment on those folks, right? I've said this again and again. Yeah. We're not looking at anyone that chooses a path in the medical profession and saying you're doing wrong somehow. And obviously, you have bad actors in every space. I don't care what it is, right? But by and large, These are folks that get into the medical profession because they want to help people, right? It really boils down to that. And the truth is, the vast majority of them don't get involved, pay attention to the business side, the finance of things. They don't know what happens after you're rolled out of that OR, right? Typically, it's just they do their part, and then they don't know that the healthcare system that they're working for, even though they're a nonprofit, is going after these people and suing them for their lungs after that lung transplant. They are all about the money. And most physicians, surgeons, people in the medical profession, I don't think they have the faintest clue of what's going on the business side and how poorly, in many cases, not all cases, but in many cases, how poorly patients are being treated when it comes to the money side of things.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that was an important sort of distinction in our documentary, is that it seems like in today's world of documentaries or media in general, everyone wants to point a finger and identify a villain. And really, in our documentary, there are no villains. And through this entire process, I told everyone that I don't believe that there is some evil villain stroking his beard that lives at the top of some dark tower controlling all of this, right? No one's setting out to harm anyone specifically. It's the system has been designed to maximize profits for all the major players involved. And whenever you're maximizing profits, right, it's coming at the expense of employers and employees, i.e. patients, right? And that was a big point in this documentary, and certainly in the creation of the documentary, was we're not throwing rocks at carriers or doctors or providers or brokers, right? We're literally identifying problems in the system, and particularly drawing attention to the misaligned incentives. And anytime you have misaligned incentives, you're going to have winners and losers. And certainly for the last 20 years, the losers of this system have been U.S. companies and patients.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. I had the honor of interviewing Dr. Jack Wolfson, who's America's #1 natural heart doctor. And, he's a board certified cardiologist who now his practice has shifted, and, rather than, have Lipitor be the first thing that comes out of his mouth when someone has high cholesterol, he says, go out and take a walk in the sunlight, because, sunlight is a great source of vitamin D, which manufactures good cholesterol. And you'd be amazed at just what getting some sun will do for your cholesterol levels. And so, it just resonates with me that you didn't set out to have a villain or a bad guy, be it a doctor or a surgeon or a health insurance carrier or a publicly traded brokerage, et cetera, because you're right. And I agree with you. So Dr. Wolfson said, hey, I'm a freedom guy. Like, if people want to go out and poison themselves with the things that they eat and they drink and what they're putting into their body, that's their right. This is America. This is the United States, and people are free to do what they want to, but you can't make me do it. You can't make, my wife do it. You can't make our kids do it. And so I think that what I love about the documentary is that there is no villain or smoking gun, if you will. But what there is there is a repeating and recurrent thread and theme, regardless of who is speaking, whether it's, Deb or it's Renzo or any of the other experts that you had in the feature. The one thing that keeps coming up is it doesn't have to be this way. You have choices, you have alternatives. And I think that it does that so well, particularly when you have examples. And I think some of the graphics that you guys came up with are spot on, because a picture is worth 1,000 words. And I think the way that you interweave your talking heads and your experts, the way that you interweave the storyline with those graphics is very, very powerful. And to hear a guy like Renzo rip apart a contract and point out things that are problematic with the language in many of the, if not all of the stock BUCA contracts is powerful, because this is black and white. There's no, even though we're not indicting anyone, I think when you look at it and you see it in black and white and you have an expert like him say, this is bad. This is not in favor of your organization or your people. I think a thinking person has to pump the brakes and say, we ought to look into that.
Yeah. Funny story about that is like that whole sequence in the documentary sort of came about off the cuff. Like that was not part of the plan. He had just brought notes with him to refer to during the interview. And we said, hey, wait a minute, what do you have there? And he was like, well, I've got these snippets from, these contracts and stuff that we were going to talk about like in the sit down interview. And then David, my director of photography, sort of came up with the brilliant idea of, hey, let's get you, over here reading this and dissecting some of this these contracts for the documentary. We probably won't do anything with it, but we might as well get it right while you're here. And it turned out to be just an amazing segment of the
Pure
documentary.
Gold.
And that is so true in so many films that you're just like, you know what? Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be fantastic. And of course, it had to make it into the film. It was just a great experience.
And then you also have an expert like Lester, right? And Lester's background is he worked for one of the big box insurance companies. I'm sorry, brokerages that was out there. I don't know if he names it during the film, but we know who it is. And it doesn't really matter, right? Whether it's, Marsh or Aon or, even some large privately held insurance brokers. What folks have to realize is, you may love your insurance representative, but what he says that is so powerful is just at the end of the day, who wakes up saying they want less revenue? That was an incredible stroke of genius, in my opinion, being able to come up with that, because it really tells the story very succinctly. And I think any C-suite professional, anyone charged with P&L responsibility that looks at this, that has to resonate with them, because there's no hiding from it, right? You don't wake up saying you want less revenue.
Well, right? I think it's one of those things that, when you say it out loud, it seems obvious, but a lot of this stuff has just flown under the radar for years. And of course, it's been written about in books and people talk about it on stage. But there's something about turning the lens on this story and forcing the viewer to come face to face, right, with the reality of the healthcare system, specifically the business of healthcare and the business decisions that they make, or in many cases just don't make, right, that they just outsource to HR or whatever because they've been convinced that they have no control over it. And, as I tell people, the truth has a certain sound to it. And I feel like that happens a lot in this documentary, where when you have these experts laying it out and all these pieces start falling into place going, well, this is right, that this price goes up because of this, and this person is incentivized to do that. It just starts ringing true. And one of the sort of side effects that we did not plan for was regular people, not business leaders, just lay people, regular day people not involved in benefits or healthcare, are finding this documentary extremely fascinating and illuminating. And that was by accident. We did not plan for that. But when we started talking with regular folks about why healthcare costs keep going up, why their premiums keep going up, man, they're invested. They like the general public wants to know, why is the system rigged against me, or why can't I get ahead?
Yeah.
Right.
And that's exactly why they should know. That's what is getting their attention, because I think, I don't want to be cynical, but I think business leaders tend to think of this as any other expense, and it's not the focus of their day-to-day activity, right? This is typically once in a year activity where the broker comes in and they spreadsheet, different carriers, and they say, "Oh, it looks like we're going to stay with United again." And that's the conversation, and they split, but in the back end, what's happening? Well, those, 6, 8, 12, 13% increases year over year means that your premiums are doubling every 8 to 10 years. And what that means is less money in the bucket and the till to go around for everyone. And it means that your average, lunchbox blue collar worker, or even white collar worker, they're kind of treading water. They're paddling harder. They're working harder. Their benefits are getting watered down. They're getting less bang for their buck. And by the way, they're not getting that increase that they were looking forward to. And, they're not seeing a bonus where once upon a time they might have seen a bonus. And so I think that what we're going to start seeing, particularly with, CAA now being in the spotlight, is the thinking on this is going to change. And it's not, let me, drag you back to, something that you said in the beginning, and it was very much kind of focused on the finance of healthcare, right? You mentioned something about EBITDA and the bottom line. And of course, any business is focused on driving revenue to the bottom line, increasing value for shareholders, 1,000%. But what's the elephant in the room? In every room that I'm in when I'm with a CFO or a CEO, what's in the back of their mind? Well, am I going to be able to see the doctor that I want to see? Or more importantly, is my wife going to be able to see the doctor that she wants to see? Or my husband? It doesn't matter, right? This is gender neutral, but the reality is people are worried about not only the finance, but does this mean limiting access to care? Does this mean I'm going to have less options? Is my coverage going to suck? Let's just put it that way, right? And what is the answer to that, do you think? And does the documentary speak to that at all?
Absolutely. And so we dive into this quite a bit in the documentary. So first is we need to work on the definition of healthcare that sucks, because right now, most company leaders and employees have got it in their head that a great health plan has just a big phone book of providers, right? The bigger the phone book, obviously, the better the health plan. And nothing could be further from the truth, because it doesn't take into account quality of healthcare.
Yeah.
So if your health plan doesn't account for quality, and sure, will allow you to go anywhere you want to go, but doesn't protect you from bad doctors, bad hospitals, bad outcomes, then is it a good health plan? Right? And I think that the American public and business leaders have sort of been brainwashed into thinking that the larger the provider of the network, the better the health plan is, the better the coverage is. And there's really no accounting for quality, and you can account for quality now. So you shouldn't be going to, and of course, this is almost a direct quote from Nurse Deb in the documentary, which is, you shouldn't be going to any provider or the provider that you want. You should be going to the provider that's best
100%
at what you need done. And the thing is, and like when you lay it out, and we do this quite a bit in the documentary, it sort of makes sense. Not all hospitals are great at all things. Some, hospitals and doctors and surgeons, they have specialties. They specialize in certain things, right? So if you need open heart surgery, you may, you want to go to this hospital because they're great at heart surgery. But if you need a hip replacement, you probably want to go over here because that's what they specialize in. That's what they do all the time.
Sure.
And when you do that, you automatically lower the cost of that thing, of whatever procedure is, because, anytime that you go to a low quality provider, you're generally going to pay more money, and certainly in the long run, or in the aggregate, as we say, because that's how health insurance works, right?
And the reason is volume and efficiency also, right? So when you're going to a high quality provider, they're not doing one of these, every 3 months. They're doing 30 of these a month. They're doing 90 of these a month. They're doing 120 of these a month, and they're set up for it. And when you go to a provider like Surgery Center of Oklahoma, the institution, the fine institution that Dr. Keith runs, he, if I'm not mistaken, I recall him saying that in many cases, he's 1/10 the price of what a surgery would be elsewhere. 1/10. And so, I laugh, I giggle, because I talk to CFOs that could tell you the price of a paperclip down to the 0.0001 penny, right? But when it comes to a high ticket item like a knee replacement or a hip replacement or, God forbid, back surgery, they don't have the first clue. And should they be paying, I don't know, $8,000 to $15,000 for that surgery? Or, if they're flying blind, looking in the rearview mirror, reviewing their healthcare costs when the broker comes in once a year to look back and say, oh, what did we pay for that, hip replacement? What did we pay for that, knee replacement? And then they find out, oh, it was, $220,000 when it could have been $15,000 and had a higher quality outcome. Folks, we got to start paying attention to this stuff, right?
Oh, and then you add on top of that, the cost of bad outcomes. So how many times does it happen that, a patient goes into a facility for a surgery, and then either that surgery is botched, or there's an infection, right? Or there's some other mistake that happens. Now the hospital just says, well, that's bad luck. But then the hospital tacks on all these additional fees and services to correct the bad outcome. Right. And in some cases, they have to do the surgery again. So a surgery that might originally cost $20,000, when you stack on all the additional services that have to be performed, right, to fix it, well, then now you might be looking at a $300,000 claim when it was only supposed to cost $20,000. So that's why quality definitely matters when it comes to the cost of healthcare.
Yeah, and just to tag on to that, it's my understanding that if you go to a Surgery Center of Oklahoma, they also have a performance guarantee. So in the event that you needed to be readmitted for a surgery a second time because of something that they fouled up, if there's an infection or something of that nature, you're not paying the second bill. So that in and of itself is huge, right? So I mentioned Dr. Wolfson. So his patient, Wendy Stevens, was a guest on our show, and she had a surgery, and she was a world-class lacrosse athlete, World Cup athlete, amazing, physical specimen. She was in elite condition. And it turns out that she had some type of a congenital anomaly that she wasn't aware of. And she was just walking around, walking up some hills in, I think it was Newport, Rhode Island. And she was like, wow, I'm like a little winded. Long story short, she had this heart valve that was not operating correctly. She did her research. She found a top surgeon and surgical team, went and had the procedure done at the Cleveland Clinic. And the footnote on that is you can sometimes have insight, pick a high quality provider. And in her case, they made a mistake. They perforated her aorta, and she ended up with a whole host of complications, ended up having to have a second surgery. But here's the interesting, footnote for our viewers and listeners. She didn't go back to the same surgeon because they basically didn't want to operate on her a second time, because this is speculation, but I believe that they were giving her pushback because they knew that it would affect their readmission rates and their quality scores. And so she ended up finding a specialist that ended up being a godsend, and having surgery elsewhere. But when you know what you know and you're an insider and you're more than just, here for a money grab. And I say that throughout all the different layers of the supply chain of healthcare, because what essentially we're doing, or any good broker or healthcare consultant or advisor is doing, is they are deconstructing your plan, and then they are reassembling that plan with high quality providers. Does it guarantee or, ensure that nothing will go wrong or that mistakes won't be made? Of course not, right? Human beings are human beings. You could be the best surgeon on the planet, have scores through the roof. If every ace mechanic is going to drop a wrench.
Yeah.
Right. It happens, right? I don't want to offend any of my surgical friends out there, right? I'm not equating you with mechanics, although sometimes I do. But the reality is people make mistakes, and it could happen anywhere. What you want to do, though, is you want to set yourself up for success.
And we talk about this in the documentary where, listen, there is no perfect system to grade a doctor or a facility, etc. Right? What you do is there's all sorts of systems where we take data, right? We analyze it, and then, to the best of our ability, we can determine, when compared to other doctors and peers of the same type, this doctor is at the top of their game, this doctor not so much, right? And the thing is, it's not about finding the perfect doctor or the perfect facility. It's about putting all the odds in favor of the patient. Right. And I think that's the best you could hope for. But I mean, when you don't do that at all, then it's just totally random.
Right.
And I mean, you're betting with your life in some cases.
No doubt. And, for those not familiar, what Bart is referring to, these aren't like Yelp reviews, right? They're not Google reviews or Amazon. And we all read that stuff. And, listen, sometimes you could see, it depends on the numbers, right? I look at Amazon reviews sometimes, and, if there are 20 reviews and one star review, I'm not going to give that 1 star review much weight. But if there are 6 reviews and there are 3 1-star reviews, that could be telling, right? But what we're referring to is information and data that's reported to CMS, and this is math and science and numbers, and it's about having professionals who have insight into that data so that they know what they're looking at. And again, does it give you certainty? No. But does it stack the odds in your favor? You bet it does. And that's what you want. So what are the plans for this documentary, Bart? I know that it's available, through your producers, for viewing, and we'll certainly put a link in the show notes for anyone that's interested in seeing it, so you have access to it. But, this is kind of in the early stages right now. It was just released earlier this month. What any big plans? Are we going to see this on Netflix or somewhere mainstream?
I don't know. So yes, I mean, obviously we'll probably put it on a streaming platform. I'm not sure which one eventually, but the reason the documentary was made this way, by bringing on producers and then giving it to the producers to use, was because I actually wanted to make an impact. And simply creating a documentary and throwing it on a streaming platform doesn't necessarily make an impact, because it puts all the responsibility on the viewer to do something, right? By, sort of arming our producers with this documentary, it sort of puts that follow-up step into the process. So you now have these, benefit experts and advisors reaching out to company leaders saying, you need to see this, you need to be aware of what's going on, and then let's follow up and talk to you about how we can put you on a better path for your company and your employees. So that's the only way that we're actually going to affect change in the healthcare industry, is by people taking action. And I think that having a group of advisors who are on the front lines. I really look at benefit advisors as sort of boots on the ground to fix the healthcare problem that we have here in the United States. And so arming them with this awesome tool, this documentary, to affect change in the marketplace, that's the right approach. Simply putting it on a streaming platform and hoping for the best. Hope is not a strategy, right? Okay, hope is not a strategy.
Golly.
So yes, we will make it available at some point on a streaming service. But right now, the name of the game is, hey, let's get as many company leaders, away from the status quo and onto a different path that actually works to their benefit and to the benefit of their employees.
Yeah, I think they're getting it. I was on a call earlier today with the CFO and, told her what I'm involved in. And I spoke about, the podcast and the documentary that I'm proud to be one of your producers on. And it was completely unsolicited. She said, send me the link to the documentary. She was like, I want to see it. So, I think people, they know already. Like, they don't need to hear from me that healthcare is broken. They know that it's broken. So the question then that, it begs the question, what can we do about it? And I think the documentary does such a splendid job of showcasing exactly that. And I commend you. It is a great work. I'm proud to be associated with it. And I can't wait for your next project. Do you have a next project teed up?
There's a couple that I'm playing with. Probably the top two topics that I sort of want to dive deeper into, and I don't care to share this with the audience, is PBMs. Like, what's going on in the pharmacy PBM space is just wild.
Heinous.
And that is just a rabbit. And as much as we wanted to, we couldn't really do a deep dive in this documentary about, pharmacy and PBMs. It was just too deep of a rabbit hole, right?
Yep.
So that will probably be a separate project in and of itself. I'm already talking to a few people about that one. And then I definitely want to do a deeper dive into what's going on with providers. I want to explore DPC, the rise of independent facilities pushing back against these large, hospital systems that have essentially a monopoly in certain geographical areas of the United States. So I think that you'll see in the future sort of a deep dive into what's going on the provider side and a deeper dive into the PBM space. And that was sort of by design of when we started this process. Is we knew that this first documentary sort of had to stay at like 40,000 feet, right? Yeah. We just need to do an overview of the healthcare system. And honestly, there was plenty of stuff. Oh, Ray, you would not believe me if I told you how much awesome stuff just got left on the editing room floor. Okay.
Really?
Oh, it was just like, it was painful to make some cuts just to get it down to, we're at like 70 minutes right now. Okay. Right. So originally it was going to be like a 45-minute documentary. And then it was like, well, that's not going to work. Okay. Let's shoot for like 55. Right. All right. Well, 60. And then we ended up at an hour and 10. Right. And there was still stuff that we wanted to put in there. So eventually, like when we take it around for like streaming, we're putting together like a director's cut that'll probably be closer to 90 minutes. And we're going to try to put some of that stuff back in that we had to take out for the initial release.
There's so much info on this topic, Bart. Really, like, you could do a mini series and not run out of material. It's. I could imagine it must have been hard, editing this down. But I think you have a topic that's compelling, and I think, to your point, it's not just CFOs and CEOs and HR leaders that are going to be interested in this. it's everybody, because this affects everybody. So listen, we could talk for days, but I think let's leave it there for now. I really appreciate you joining. Congratulations to you on the success of this. It is a great piece of work. Look, I'm not saying that you're going to, you want to spend your vacation time watching this, ladies and gentlemen, but if you are interested in like just diving in or dipping your toe in the water to say, hey, I think we may be doing it wrong. Is there a better way to do healthcare? Or, let's just take a look. I think it might get your attention and you might get sucked into the rabbit hole on this one. So great job to you and your team. And we look forward to the next one. But let's leave it there for today. Bart, thank you so much. Folks, we'll see you on the next one.
So that's it for today's episode of Broken Healthcare. Head on over to iTunes or wherever you listen and subscribe to the show. One lucky listener every single week who posts a review on iTunes will win a chance in the grand prize drawing to win a $15,000 value private VIP day with Ray Kober himself. Be sure to head on over to brokenhealthcarepodcast.com and pick up a free copy of Ray's gift and join us on the next episode.